Hello and welcome to Drilling Insight. I'm your host, Jeremy Verduzco, editor of National Driller. I'm joined today by expert drilling trainer and frequent National Driller writer and co-host, Brock Yorkie. Hi, Brock.
Hey, Jeremy. How are you doing?
I'm good. Just living the dream in quarantine.
Yeah.
And also by Bo Burgess of Yellowjacket Drilling. Hello, Bo.
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing good.
Excellent. So we reached out to Yellowjacket to talk about a recent job the company did for the Phantom Ranch in the Grand Canyon National Park. Visitors usually get to the ranch by mule, so we wanted to hear a little bit more about how Yellowjacket got this remote job done. Thanks everyone for joining us. Let's get started. So first off, let's start with the project itself. Who was the client and what were the basics of the planned well, Bo?
Well, we were contracted directly by HDR, who was working for the National Park Service. And ultimately, they are doing a massive infrastructure upgrade there in the park. I'm not sure how many people are familiar, but ultimately there's a single water line that feeds the entire park, the hotels, Phantom Ranch, all of that. It constantly requires tons of maintenance for the park. And so they're in the middle of this really large project to update the water line and so forth. And one of the things they wanted to do was to reduce the amount of water line they're using was to drill some test wells down at Phantom Ranch at the bottom of Bright Angel Creek and try to supplement the water supply that way.
Okay.
And that's how we were, or that's why we were contacted.
Okay. So did Yellowjacket do the job from start to finish, or were there earlier test wells that were part of the project plan?
We did it all in one phase. There was a few test wells and some monitor wells, and we did them all in essentially one shot to get them in there, and then they've been tested and so forth by the park and HDR and whatnot. But we completed it in one event.
Okay.
So you guys, these are water wells then that you guys went in to do test wells to do a production well then, or what?
Yeah, so what's happening is, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with this, but ultimately there's a large spring up Bright Angel Creek on the north rim, and it comes down a pipeline, goes to Phantom Ranch, and then it's pumped up to the south rim. This pipeline is old, cold forged aluminum, it breaks all the time. The park spends millions of dollars a year trying to maintain it. And so what they wanted to do was it's the same water source, essentially. It's the Bright Angel, we were in the Bright Angel Delta by definition, but it's the same water source. And what they wanted to do is to try to alleviate how much of that pipeline they're using up Bright Angel Canyon, up the north rim. So their idea was to go in and drill some test wells down at Phantom Ranch, and that essentially, hopefully, I think their goal was to alleviate that portion of the pipeline and start the pipeline from Phantom Ranch that literally does go under the bridge and up the south rim to the south side, to the south rim.
Okay.
The test wells went in. They want to be able to test and see what kind of yield they could get to see if they could supplement the pipeline or even potentially get rid of it. But I don't think they'll be able to do that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty drilling questions, tell us about the safety program for this remote location. Were there special protocols or equipment that you had to send your team out with?
Well, for us, it didn't seem like anything special. We're used to doing work like this. There were obviously a fair amount of things that were, I guess we'll say, heightened. Obviously, working down at Phantom Ranch, or the entrance to it, there's a lot of people, a lot of tourists going by, the mule trains, things like that. Now, we're accustomed to working around people, but that was certainly something that, we had to adjust for. Safety protocol would have been a little different. stuff, but not that different for us. Bringing down fuel cells. We had to circulate a lot of fuel tanks in this process, and so we're grounding everything down there. Changing the color of our safety equipment, exclusion zones, and fencing from that high vis orange to natural browns and grays to kind of blend in with the park there, primarily for the mule train. And then, the mule train was something else. And then ultimately, we're flying things in, and so you have a whole rigging perspective. And quite frankly, and Brock, you're well aware, lifting 20, 30,000 pounds really isn't that much of a load. We're used to that kind of weight, but we're not typically flying it. So bringing it all together, we put everything into these large Connex boxes like you would see, shipping containers. And then we got the rigging. We have a safety director here named Dave Messina, is a really sharp guy. And the rigging itself was pretty simple. It was just making sure everything is in the right spot and lines up. And then once we finished that, we kind of turned everything over to the heli team there at the Grand Canyon. They would connect, fly, and do all that stuff on their own. And so really getting the rigging prepared was probably the only thing that was actually a little different for us this time.
So for the helicopters, was that a Park Service contractor or like a standing contractor for the parks?
It is. So what the way I understood it was our government has a couple of large contracts with different helicopter outfitters or contractors, and they're on essentially a retainer contract, and they work for all sorts of different departments in the government, and the Park Service is able to hire them. And the Park Service at the Grand Canyon has their own helibase. They have to do search and rescue and things like that. And so it's coordinated through them. And so when you're watching, the video, perhaps you'll see the smaller helicopter that's moving guys in and out of the canyon. That's their search and rescue. That's the stuff that the park does every day. And then the Chinook was brought in as essentially as a contractor.
Okay.
So there's so many questions I want to ask here. I think starting out, you just said that you guys changed your safety colors because obviously we got these mules walking through and they're already hearing this drill rig, and now we didn't want to be reflective. We wanted to have the park feel. So you said you changed your safety colors, but like you're in a remote location, drilling's, dangerous with rotating, those things going on. You can't, if somebody gets hurt, it's not like we can throw them in a pickup truck and drive to the crossroad, or we can just flag in an emergency vehicle. So like, what was the emergency action plan? Like, what was the contingency for a catastrophic failure that could have happened?
Well, from a personnel perspective, it was pretty straightforward. The Park Service has a pretty solid protocol already in place, and we had Park Service staff with us at all times. So they're on a radio. If anybody was to get hurt, they could radio up, and as long as the helicopter wasn't out doing something else, it's a 6-minute flight. So we could essentially have attention in about, we'll say less than 10 minutes down to where we were working.
Wow.
We were literally working a stone's throw away from the helipad down at Phantom Ranch. So if somebody was hurt, we could literally get a helicopter to them within 10 minutes and get them out. Fortunately, we didn't have any near misses or circumstances or accidents, so that was good. And then from an equipment perspective, one of the things we like to think that, we excel here is at Yellowjacket is logistics. And so we took 2 of everything down there or more.
Yeah, for sure.
We did run into a couple complications. Things break on a rig, Brock, as you're well aware. And so we typically, obviously we took all extra tools down there. We took spare hoses, a couple of spare parts, for the head and things like that, should anything go awry. We brought extra hammers and things like that, should we have, any struggles. Casing jacks and a, portable pack went down there. We only had to use them once, but, casing did get stuck.
Yeah, you want to be looking at those tools instead of thinking, where's the helicopter and when can we run something back in here, right?
Yeah, so the Chinook comes in on both ends of the project, and we shipped everything in those large containers, and everything that was large or heavy, we'll say anything over 800 pounds, had to happen then. So multiple fuel cells, drill casing, the whole shebang, everything went down there at the beginning. And then during the project, we had the availability, and we used the small helicopter that's based at the park. About every other day, we would run fuel runs. We had multiple cells. We would just fly in and out about every second, third day. We'd take food down there that way, that kind of thing. And so little things we were able to move about. But really, other than fuel and food, we got everything we needed in on the first run, the first 2 days with the Chinook.
So what about like the environmental, you're talking about fuel cells, flying them in and out. You know, you said this is the park standard protocol for, you know, emergencies, but drilling and fuel cells, and this isn't standard protocol. So like, what were some of the environmental rules? Like, what were some of the restrictions? Because this is, you know, a protected area. And again, you know, we obviously want to be as smart and safe as possible, but what were the concerns? What were those plans?
Well, there's no doubt about that. The last thing Yellowjacket wanted to be was the guys that did something wrong in the canyon. Fortunately, we worked together with the Park Service, and, you know, we have a really good safety team here, and we came up with some good ideas. Ultimately, when it comes to fuel, which was probably the biggest one, we ran fuel cells down there. We did primary and secondary containment should anything spill or leak. So down on the bottom, we cleared out an area. We took a small Bobcat down there. We flew it in one of the boxes, and we were able to grade the area. And to one of the little areas, we built a small pad, and we were able to set up secondary containment for all the fuel cells and anything like that was stored down there. And then all the fuel cells were on essentially, we typically call them it's just like it's a drum pallet where you put 2 drums on a pallet in case they leak. We just custom built the tanks to fit that. So once they were down there, they're strapped to a fuel pallet, and they're on that, and then they're on secondary containment. And then anytime we moved it off of that, obviously we would set up another another visqueen area where we could lay fuel next to the rig to fuel things and whatnot. Lots of visqueen.
Oh, so I guess last question. You said a Bobcat. You're disrupting. Again, drilling, we have to lay out the site so it's safe, and we have, you know, all of these disruptive things, but this is a protected park. So like, I know you guys being in Arizona, at some point you went through like tortoise sensitivity training, or, you know, like that type of stuff. Was there any of that? Like, hey, these are the things we're looking out for. Don't step on this cactus, or what?
Do mules spook easily? You know, are you trying to keep the decibels down for them? What?
It's funny that you bring up the mules, because that's really what it was. We did have a small, you know, we had a couple briefings with the group before we went down there. Phantom Ranch is pretty heavily traveled. You know, thousands of people go through, you know, tens of thousands go through there every year with the hikers, the river rafters. So for the most part, we didn't have any lizards, frogs, tortoises, things like that we had to worry about. They were sensitive about how much area we disturbed. We mapped that all out for the previous year. I did some trips up there. We went down there and started marking out what our plans would be and what areas we would disturb. We're often accustomed to working in small spots and trying to disturb as little as possible. And to be honest, guys, I was really surprised at how much leeway they actually gave us with disturbing things down there.
Well, it is a big hole. So, I mean.
Yeah, and they actually showed us some pictures and some things that had been done before. And it's amazing how fast it can restore itself and start to look pseudo-normal in just a year or two.
Okay.
Flood events come through there and whatnot. And quite frankly, as a side note, where we were building our path to get from well to well, we ended up doing it right along Bright Angel Creek. And they were going to take that path. And then when we were done, they told us not to restore it because they wanted to turn it into an actual hiking path right along Bright Angel Creek. So things like that really kind of played favorably for us and into another one's hands. The mules, on the other hand, were a big issue. So I'm not kidding. And it's in our video, in the main video that came out. You see the mules walking down, and all of a sudden they just stop and turn around. And
they get that one ear, and that ear's like looking at it, and it's like, this is not here. I travel this path every day.
That's exactly right. And when they told us that, we were like, oh, okay. You know, we didn't think it'd be this dramatic, but it took the mules about 3-4 days to get used to us. Okay. And then they just started marching right along. But we have some footage that didn't actually make the cut, but it's pretty funny. You can see the mule train coming in, and the first 2 mules just stop in their tracks. They don't even think about it. They just turn around and start walking back the way they came.
Okay.
And what they ultimately did was they would radio down to the ranger about 30-40 minutes before they got there, and we would just stop drilling and wait.
Okay.
And they would come through and do their thing, and then we'd get back to work.
Okay. Okay. Now you were working daylight hours, so you were working definitely when tourists were there trying to enjoy themselves too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like most drill sites, it's interesting to people. They don't see this kind of equipment every day. So there were, you know, there are rangers down there, and there was our client having geologists on staff. So for the most part, as somebody came up, they could answer questions and kind of move them along. I know my guys got asked lots of questions at night. They stayed down there, and so
I've worked a lot of environmentally sensitive projects, and one was in the West Chicago suburbs. It was this big park that was there that, you know, nothing was to ever disturb it, and we were in there because it was a right of way with a big pipeline. And I spent the entire week telling folks that we were putting in a Starbucks just to screw with everybody. So.
Well, we definitely weren't putting in a Starbucks, but there was definitely a lot of attention. And for the most part, the Park Service did a really good job of keeping all the tourists to a single trail that kind of went by us a little ways away from where we were drilling. So for the most part, it really wasn't too bad. Just a lot of questions, which is pretty manageable and easy enough.
So where did you get water? I haven't heard you say you flew in any water. Go ahead.
The water for drilling, we actually pulled right out of Bright Angel Creek.
Okay.
10 feet from where, 20 feet from where we were drilling. So anything that we needed for makeup water or anything like that, we were able to get right there. And then as far as drinking water goes, the guys just drink off the water source that's down there for all the tourists.
Okay.
So that actually was pretty easy.
Okay. Yeah, it's always amazing to me to see how folks make do in these remote sites. So tell us about this mobilization. You know, what kind of equipment were you using, and you know, how? I mean, we discussed a little bit the helicopter, but can you give us a little bit more detail on how that trip came together, and you know, how many containers you brought in, that sort of thing?
Sure. I'll start with the drill rig. We used essentially a custom-made limited access. It's a hollow stem auger rig, and we have a head on the back that we can convert. So we can auger, we can core, we can drive casing, mud rotary, what have you. And we set up for air casing advance, Odex or Stratex.
Yep.
And it's just a little rig. It's about 12.5 feet long, 6 feet wide. We took the tower apart, and we were able to fit it just inside of a 20-foot Connex box.
Okay.
So we had a 20-foot Connex box that took down large equipment, our drill rig, our Bobcat, and then we took a 700 series compressor down there.
Okay.
Those 3 things all went down in a 20-footer, and that 20-footer would fly in and out with each load. And when we were done getting all the big equipment down there, it stayed down, or excuse me, that box came out at the end.
Okay.
And then we flew 3 10-foot Connex boxes that stayed on the floor. One was all well materials, one was all drill tools, casing, rods, and then the other one was full of miscellaneous supplies, you know, fencing and, you know, hand tools and whatnot.
Yeah.
And those stayed down there. We were able to lock things up at night, just, you know, that way if tourists are looking around, not that anyone's going to take anything, but, you know, so they don't get hurt or get into anything. And it was pretty straightforward. We brought everything up to the canyon, got everything inspected at the south rim there at the helibase. Park people inspected us pretty heavily, making sure there was no foreign dirt or weeds or anything like that coming in on the equipment.
Okay.
Piece of cake for us. Everything came in freshly deconned and clean. And then obviously we were inspected by the heli team. Our boxes, our slings, all of that kind of stuff that was actually used to transport the boxes they went through. We bought everything new, all the bridles and things like that.
Yeah.
And so there really wasn't any issues with that. And then after the inspections and so forth, we just went through 2 days and they would fly something down. They had, we sent guys down there first and they did as well. We'd pick up a box at the South Rim, fly it down, get it down there. And then typically if it was the big box, they would work on unloading it while the helicopter flew back to the surface to get another box. And on a couple of trips, they would then take a 10-foot box, set it, pick up the 20-footer so that we could reload it at the surface and so forth. And getting everything in took about 2 days. Anything that comes up in the park is a priority over what we're doing. Any search and rescue, injury, what have you, or just any other park service needs. So every, once in a while you get a delay for something, but for the most part, it went really smooth and was well organized and really went off without any hitches.
So that's, the YouTube video is awesome. So I encourage everybody to go check this YouTube video out because it's what excited Jeremy and I about this.
And that's just the trailer.
Yeah,
that's right. We just released the full-length feature today.
Oh, awesome. That's perfect. That's a big helicopter, and I've been on fly-in jobs. So 2 questions here. Why such a big helicopter? Was it the time of year, that massive Huey versus the, I know we've flown in on smaller helicopters things. Was it the weight? Why that size of a helicopter?
It's the weight. At this point, and you'll see this in the videos, our working capacity was just under 20,000 pounds. Okay. The drill rig, the box, by the time you're dealing with this stuff, you're getting 17, 18, 19,000 pounds. And so in order to support that kind of load, that's why they brought that in. Obviously, weather, time of year, air temperature, these all play a factor in what kind of pull and lift a helicopter can get. So when you read about these sky cranes or these large Chinooks that they talk about, this was one of the largest ones in the lower 48. And I think they said it picks up 26,000 pounds, but that's at sea level.
Wow. Right.
And that's at a certain time of the year.
And
so when you get, the South Rim is, 7,000 feet and, it's fall, so it's cooler. So that helps. But that gave us a payload range of about 18 to, let's say, 20,000 pounds. So our goal with the park was to keep everything at 18,000 pounds or under. Mm-hmm. But, a drill rig, even though by itself it weighs under 13, you add this big box to move it. These are pretty heavy loads. And really the only way to get that stuff down there is with something large and hence the large Chinook.
And do they keep that large Chinook? You said that there was times where you had to wait for the park to use the helicopters for other things. They use that large Chinook for other things happening at the park?
They did, actually. Good question. They are in the middle of a whole infrastructure updating. It's I think it's an 8-year project they have going on. So they brought it in and they are replacing parts of the pipeline and the pumping systems that are actually on the South Rim side. Okay. And so in between our loads, they may fly a load in for those guys, which they were doing. They try to keep that thing pretty busy. They also, while we're loading in, they'll come back up and they'll have to fuel and things like that. So they have their own downtime in between loads as well.
Okay.
But they do keep it as busy as they can for 3 days straight.
Yeah, I'm sure. So once you did get to the drilling, did things go as planned, or did you have unexpected challenges, geology, terrain, anything like that?
For the most part, it was very challenging. The holes weren't very big or very deep, so that's always helpful. But what you end up with down there, kind of in a geologic sense, is you have everything from sand, gravels, and cobbles to boulders the size of a house. I mean, you're really in a very unusual, it's very tightly confined. And so in one area, you could be drilling through sand, gravels, cobbles, and boulders, but 10 feet over is bedrock. I mean, you're literally coming right down where the canyon comes down. And so we have a very small alluvial delta there, and that's what we're drilling through. And it was a bit challenging, but when you use an air casing system, that's actually exactly what it's meant for. For the most part, everything went off without a hitch. We did lose one hole. We had casing jacks and a power pack down there, so my guys just put it on there, pulled it out, probably took a half a day, got the casing freed up, scooted over, and started the next hole.
So
Okay.
did the geologist just completely geek out on, we don't get to drill in the bottom of the Grand Canyon very often. You said they were there. Were they collecting samples and just taking as much of this in as they could?
Oh yeah, everybody was except for the Park Service. They worked down there every day, but the geologists, the drillers, even the survey crew we brought in, everybody was just really excited to be there. And for the most part, the equipment went into the big helicopters, but all the personnel went in the small helicopters, and everybody got a chance to fly in and out of the canyon in a helicopter. And although it made a few of them very nervous, they all really, really enjoyed the ride.
So did you say your crew stayed down there for the duration of the job?
Yeah, we did.
Who drew those short straws?
Well, it's funny that you say that. We do a lot of specialty access work in all sorts of random ways with different rigs. And I usually, in this case, went and talked to my crews. And there were one or two guys that were like, hey, don't assign me to that if you don't need to. But I would say about 75% of my guys were like, yes, please, I'd love to go on that job.
Grand Canyon, yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, absolutely. And to stay at the bottom. So we did 2 shifts. The first shift was about 3 weeks. The second shift was just short of 3 weeks. And they pretty much just worked straight through. They stayed at rangers' quarters down below. So they had a nice little cabin and a fridge and, stove and all of that kind of thing. But for the most part, they just stayed down there and worked each day, and it really went pretty smooth. The guys were excited to be there. Yeah, and when they were times, for whatever reason, they you know how it goes. You finish a task, and you don't want to start a new one because there's just not enough time.
Yeah.
Or they're waiting for whatever reason for the geologist to do something. The guys would go for a hike and whatnot. So they really enjoyed themselves down there.
Oh, for sure. So was the demobilization just as kind of nail biting as the mobilization, getting everything in? Was bringing it all out, was that about the same?
It really was about the same challenge. We were a little bit better prepared now that we had gone through it once. So it went a little smoother in that sense. The thing that got us, and you'll see this in the full length video, is we got snowed in when we started the extraction. So we get everybody up to South Rim. We're all done. Everybody's happy. We're getting ready to come out. And that night, a early season storm rolled in. We got a couple inches of snow at the South Rim. And we were on delay for 3 days. Everybody just sat tight. Fortunately, we had done a food run right before all of this, so there was plenty of food. Brock, you'll like this. We had to bring surveyors in to survey the holes, and they came in right at the end, and they were supposed to be in and out in a single day. And well, that was the day they flew in, so they got stuck down there for 3 days.
Poor guys.
We prepared them. We told them to bring change of clothes and all these things because anything is unexpected. And so they brought their gear with them, but they stayed down there an extra 3 days instead of an afternoon to survey these 5 points. But we had the space. My guys had plenty of food to help them out, so it all worked out pretty good. The weather on the floor when that happened was gorgeous because, it's a pretty big drop, and so there's definitely a different change in temperature and conditions when you're down there. And so I would talk to the guys on a satellite phone just to see how they're doing, and they're like, well, we can see that it's gray up there, but it's lovely down here. So they just had 3 extra days down on the floor to go hiking and whatnot. But other than that, the extraction went pretty good. We had a new helicopter team that came in, and those guys were sharp. I mean, they were fast. And when the window came, we only had about a day or so before more weather, and those guys didn't skip a beat. They were very impressive.
Okay.
So in the demobilization, what about restoration? You said that you got to leave a path for a hiking path, but we have drill solids. you have all of these things that we've done. What was the restoration process, or did somebody else come in and do that?
We did it ourselves. It really wasn't very much. A small Bobcat, 770 on tracks doesn't make a huge footprint. And the drill rig really isn't that different. It is also on tracks. It has a very low PSI, so it's not tearing up the ground. It's just where we carved a path to do the work.
Yeah.
The drill cuttings, they're small holes. They're 50 feet. We didn't make a bunch, so we were able to take them kind of over to an area and spread them out a little bit. When you drill a 1,200-foot ag well, there's a lot of dirt to deal with. 50-footer, 8-inch hole doesn't take that much. So it's pretty easy to blend in with the surroundings. It really wasn't that big a deal. You could definitely tell we had been there. Some of the vegetation was knocked down, but not a lot. And a lot of it they were able to roll over. And when you're done, it starts to kind of grow back. And the restoration really wasn't that big of an effort.
Okay, so you didn't have to haul cuttings out by donkey?
No, sir.
A stubborn, angry donkey.
Yeah, I don't know if they would have liked that, but yeah, no, we were able to just spread it all down there.
Well, I mean, I've had projects that are in like way more civilized areas that have had more stringent expectations. Was there anything that the engineers or the park had these just crazy expectations that, as a project manager or bidding this, you're like, okay, yeah, we can do that, but this is what it's going to cost? Like, was there anything crazy that you had to do?
The drilling project itself really, aside from being in the canyon and flying in, really wasn't that outrageous. It was pretty straightforward. There were a few things that the engineers asked for that were a little bit kind of, hey guys, that's not quite, like they want to pump test these and no big deal, but they wanted to pump test them like they're ag wells or something. And it's like, well, guys, you're at a 5-inch well here. So there are more limitations, but things like that was really about it. It's interesting because just like you said, Brock, we work at a lot of places up on, I call it the surface, a lot of places up on the surface that have a lot more stringent guidelines and, people asking us to make water hover and, things like that.
Right.
You've been around that. They understood that they needed these wells. They needed to do this test program, and that was priority number one for them. So as long as we were following some really basic criteria, they were really open with allowing us to do what it was we needed to do. We were very lucky. It was very easy. The reality of it, in my opinion, was it was just the air logistics that really, added that type of element.
So this was a government job, right?
Correct.
So you had a relationship with the engineering firm, or was this like a big bid process and you guys had to meet all the different qualifications that go into a government job, and then it's the Grand Canyon and flying, and like, this is a big deal?
It is, and that's a really interesting question, how this came about and how it landed with Yellowjacket. The consultants and Park Service had tried to do this before, and it did not work out for them. They treated it more like your typical contractor scenario, and they just found that they didn't get what they were hoping for out of a contractor. So I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of random specialty access kind of drilling. We have a variety of track rigs that can go all sorts of places. And one of the gentlemen at HDR sent out an email through the company and said, hey, we're struggling with this, any ideas? And somebody, I believe in their Arizona office, had turned them on to us and said, well, if anyone can get it done, it's these guys. They go all sorts of places. So they called, we got together with them. We had a few phone meetings, and then we kind of came to some terms, and I think they liked what we were saying about how we would think about approaching things. And that really got the ball rolling. We didn't go through a bidding process. We did go through a small, very informal interview process.
Sure.
But in reality, I think they were looking to find the right contractor. And once they felt comfortable with that, the work was just negotiated from that point on. They were very cognizant of, they didn't want to create an environment of low bid and pressure and not getting what they wanted. We love those jobs.
Yes.
So really, again, like I said, after a few meetings and talking about the kind of stuff we can do, what we have done, they felt pretty comfortable, and that began the trips up to the canyon to start, surveying the area, how we're going to approach things. We even started at the very beginning about maybe floating some of the equipment down.
Okay.
They obviously, the river rafters come through there, and so there was some options with that. So we were looking at that, and we just described to them. And every time they had a question, we gave them what we thought was the right answer, and it worked out pretty well. And they ultimately felt very comfortable with us and our abilities to do this. We came at it with a very different drilling approach than what they had been looking at before, and I think that was one of the things that really made them feel comfortable about it.
And I'm sure it can't hurt to have a project like this under your belt to, be able to show to other entities that are looking for difficult work, like this is part of our portfolio. This is what we can do.
Oh yeah, just ultra excited about it. We've had a really good response to the trailer that's out there. But it's just, it's like you said, it's great to have under our belt. It's great for our company's resume. We do these kinds of jobs, so it's really nice to be able to demonstrate our ability to handle tough situations, logistics, things like that. It really is a feather in our cap. I was really proud of the job. It's one of the bigger ones. Not necessarily the biggest job I've done, but certainly one of the most significant, with some of the greatest impact for myself.
Well, what's fantastic is we're a small community when it comes to drilling. And, from oil and gas to geotech to water to all these aspects, we get different, perceptions, and this is an environmentally sensitive area. It's a, wonder of the world, and people love this place. We got a lot of people that are appreciating the nature. And then drilling, we get these times where the perception of drilling is it's going to be this big nasty process, and things are going to break and they're going to leak, and we're going to have these things. So for you to step in, execute with no major issues, no major near misses, all of these wonderful things, it's great for our community to go, look, we stepped into this park. We did everything that the expectations were, and you're welcome. We can do this elsewhere if we hold these expectations. So it's great to have you done that. It's awesome.
Thank you. We certainly feel that way. Obviously, you guys saw the trailer. The video comes out today. It's a great way for us to market ourselves and to be able to do these kinds of things. And we're just real excited about how it all turned out. Our client and their client, the Park Service, were really happy. They see all sorts of contractors come through there. We're environmental drillers by trade. So being able to handle just, being prepared if anything should leak and things like that, and not leaving a mess behind. They seem to be really, really happy about how we did things and all of that. We did have a hose go, but we were contained on visqueen. It only lasted 2 seconds. Didn't get off the visqueen. We had hoses there to change what was there. When casing got stuck, we had casing jacks, and we were able to remove the casing and move over and start again. And we really left, I think we left a really positive image with the Park Service.
Excellent. So from a project manager perspective, are there lessons that you can take from this job to future jobs here?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's always things you can learn from just about any job you do moving forward with other projects. Obviously, one of the big ones here is just logistics. There was a lot of things to stay on top of: fuel, communicating with the guys at the bottom of the canyon, where, we're used to using satellite phones with rigs already, but it's those kinds of logistics that, just another type of exercise we've been through that helps us with anything that comes up in the future, be it we're running through the air or not, whether we need to take in fuel or not, and how we do those things, food, guys camping or accommodations, whatever they are. It's an excellent experience that just really helps you. Once you've done this, you can look at it and go, well, what's the next task? We have ideas and we can think in that direction, whatever's coming our way.
Yeah.
That's what I absolutely love about drilling is, we're discovering the unknown. We can prepare for everything, and you guys did that, but now we're drilling, in a hole that, we don't know what's quite going to happen. And so it's cool to see this happen the way it has. And so is there now going to be like a Yellowjacket special ops group? Because I'll join. Like I would totally go stay in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, or, the Atacama Desert's behind me. I've always discovering the unknown and going to crazy places is exactly what I love about this industry. So is that what you guys like now you're the team. You're the Navy SEALs of drilling right now. So.
Well, I'd like to think so. I know me and my guys certainly like to think that about ourselves. Again, it went off very well for us, so we're pretty proud of it. But it definitely, we do have that element. We've done other strange jobs in strange locations. You know, it might take 2 or 3 days just to track things in, just to get to the hole, and then camp for 2 or 3 weeks while they drill, and then, you know, bring it all back out. We do like to think of ourselves that there's just about no hole we can't get to.
Very cool.
What's that?
Very cool. Yes, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So would you take on more projects like this one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. It's stressful at moments. You know, you're watching a helicopter pick up your drill rig, and the last thing you want is
my baby.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be the guy that lost a rig at Phantom Ranch and now there's a new set of rapids for the rafters, you know?
Yeah.
Drill rig rapids. You know, you don't want to be a part of that. But it's definitely something that, you know, it's exciting. It's a new challenge. And these are the things that I think all people in any line of work like to encounter, and especially when you come out at the end on top. We look forward to challenges like this. It's something that we think often separates us from a lot of our competitors. And if anybody has a project that is, you know, difficulty or has special constraints or just tight quarters, you know, we are the guys. We want to be able to do that work. And I think we've demonstrated even before this job that, you know, we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's all the questions I have. Brock, did you have any other questions?
No, I'm going to go watch the video as soon as we're done here. I'm completely geeked about this. So awesome job, Yellowjacket and Bo, and tell your team, great work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I for sure have been looking forward to the full length video, and we'll certainly put it in the show notes when this publishes. So thanks, Bo. Challenging complex projects like this really separate drillers from those who kind of merely run a drill. I really thought the mobilization is the most interesting part of this. I mean, there are definitely helicopter mobilizations out there. It's not unusual. I've heard of it before, but just the size of that helicopter, it's alarming. It's really huge. Brock, what do you think?
Well, I think my favorite part so far is when Bo said that they thought about like fording the river. Like now I'm suddenly thinking like Oregon Trail, and like they're like, nah, we're just gonna float everything down. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, it's full of fluid. Like I would rather drop it from 7,000 feet than to know that it sank and everything just, is now run down river for however far. And we just have all of these crazy, like, I can't even think of what the catastrophe would be. So, but again, I'm like, let's float I want to float a drill rig. Let's see how that goes.
I will say, Jeremy, it was pretty interesting. That Chinook, when it's parked there in front of you, is a little bigger than a Greyhound bus.
Wow.
And with dual rotors in such a tight space, that backwash from the rotors is fierce. When we were at the surface and they were taking stuff out, I'm sure it was the same on the floor.
Yeah.
They had a little side-by-side gator, and the downward force was so much, even with the parking brake on, it slid about 10 feet. It didn't roll over or anything, but it just slid about 10 feet. And the amount of backwash, as they would call it, from those rotors is just, it's hard to stand in. It really is. I mean, this helicopter was just enormous, and to be able to utilize it, get it down there, and the guys do what they did down there was really exciting.
All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap up today's episode. Thanks again to Bo Burgess and to Yellowjacket Drilling for sharing the details of this project. Bo, where can people find out more about Yellowjacket?
Well, the easiest way to get to us is our website, www.yjdrilling.com. We're always there, and we have a YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube and just type in Yellowjacket Drilling, it'll take you to our page. And you can always Google us at Yellowjacket Drilling, and we'll pop up there as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, and visit www.nationaldriller.com for the latest drilling news and for more videos like this one. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And see you next time on Drilling Insight. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.